So, welcome to Coachable. I am live with my friend, Dr. Spencer Nadolsky. A quick backstory, and obviously there's a bigger introduction, Spencer, but Dr. Spencer, pardon me. But the backstory is that I think we met, you had maybe just started to max out your friends on Facebook, like your fan page could only hold 5,000 fans,
Personal
but
page, personal page.
your personal page. But it has been a wild ride from the time that we met to where you are now. So, first of all, welcome to the show. But second of all, let's get into that wild ride because it has been fun watching you
10
in your
years.
career.
We've
10 years
been
we've known
10
each other.
years. Fitness Summit 20, I think it's
14?
2014. I believe
Yeah.
it was 2014.
Yeah, and what a friendship it is. I mean, I'm even wearing your Carolina blue
I
to
know.
support, uh,
Representing Tar
that's right,
Heels.
Tar Heels. But yeah, so let's dive a little deeper into the history. Why, a previous All-American or second team All-American?
Yeah, I was in overtime to be an All-American. So I was top 10. Top
Okay,
eight is
but in a
it's a touchy
heavyweight,
subject. Heavyweight,
you're
yeah, that's
fine,
correct.
but not in a,
I was an
like in a
academic All-American, but I should
fine.
have been I should have been an actual legit All-American. I blew it. I got too tired at the end and stalled, and they called me for it, and I was winning. It was a
Oh,
bad. It was. I hate so frustrating to think about, but whatever. It's
well,
it's it's made me who I am today to go finish the match.
that's right. That's right. So, all right. So, previous massive athletic history, and some would argue success. I would argue success. You're an athletic success in my eyes, Spencer. How do you go from Division I athletics, all academic All American, to an obesity specialist? There wasn't really this category of specialist,
No,
right,
yeah,
when
it's
you
kind of new.
started. So, how talk me through that journey? How did you find that to be your calling?
Yeah, the gist is that I knew I wanted to be a doctor. Everybody said, "Well, you're big, strong, heavyweight. You got to be an orthopedic surgeon." That's what it's a stereotype. Big, strong people go into ortho because like they break bones and put them back together, and it's just like ortho break bones. That's they're it's a stereotype literally in medicine. They don't really think about the physiology. They just think about let's fix bone. And I shadowed a guy actually at UNC. They were recruiting me for, for wrestling, and I was going to play football there too. They put me in with a day with the orthopedic surgeon there because they're like, I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to do this. That's what everybody says I should do. And I did it. And I was like, I, I don't know what kind of doctor I want to be, but I know it's not that. Like it was so, I don't know, nothing. I had a biceps, tendon rupture, and my ortho surgeon was amazing. So appreciative of him. And my right arm works very well now. And but it was just I knew I didn't want to do that. I really like physiology and pathophysiology and kind of internal type of medicine, endocrine type of stuff. And also, people thought, well, then sports medicine in general, then, right? And I was like, no, I don't care about getting people's bench press from a 300 and whatever to a 400 and whatever, or making people run from a 4.7 40 yard dash to a 4.6 or 4.5 or something like that. I really liked the thought of getting normal people who don't work out or eat well to actually just start doing it, because the jump in health gains that you get from doing nothing, none of those things, to just doing some of those things is just such a massive incremental increase compared to someone like us who's very health conscious to then kind of optimize things. So you get a little incremental benefits from if we were to tinker around and improve some things, but the most bang for the buck is from people who don't do any of those things and just getting them to go. So like think about like type 2 diabetes. Um, I just want them to, like, instead of like increase from a 300 to a 400 pound bench press, I just want them to start bench pressing, start squatting, start moving in general, instead of like, oh, hey, maybe we should try this special way of dieting. It's like, hey, let's try to swap out these regular sodas for some calorie-free drink. Let's let's find ways to reduce your and just very basic stuff, but not super in the weeds technical. And because what happens that those people put their type 2 diabetes into remission. They're, if you're helping people lose substantial amounts of weight, all of a sudden, the best example is like I hear a lot of patients tell me like I can finally walk around with my kids or grandkids around Disney. It's always Disney for whatever reason.
Mm.
And probably because it's where they finally do a bunch of steps. Like you have to walk everywhere. Sure, you could get a scooter and whatever, but that can be really tough. Is the place is crowded. So what they'll always say Disney, and like when they help them lose a substantial amount of weight, they say now I can finally do this without pain or sitting down every so often. So those types of things were very fulfilling to me. So basically what happened is the idea of obesity medicine started to it was always kind of a thing, but not its own specialty until technically I believe it was 2014 is when it started. And then I think I got my certification right after I graduated residency in 2014. In 2015, I took the boards. But during medical school, it was one of these things like, what am I going to do? Am I going to do endocrinology? Uh, am I going to do this and that? So eventually I did family medicine, which is very broad, and then specialized further into obesity medicine, something called lipidology, which is study of like lipids, so cholesterol, triglycerides, those metabolism. So anything, oh, this person's cholesterol is high. Oh, it could be from their diet and genes. Oh, no, but I can go further and kind of help them with that. But yeah, in general, the gist is that I really liked it was fulfilling to help people instead of optimizing little things to prevent and treat chronic disease that had a massive impact on their quality of life. Like that's it. That's the gist. It was just fulfilling. That's all.
I think it's so powerful what you just said because and I'm going to repeat it, but what you said was somebody who's not doing much, if anything, from a physical activity standpoint, or even from a nutritional awareness standpoint, and they go to make that leap, right? Even though these we would quantify in the health and fitness world that they are basic movements, right? That you and I would do with just again different scaled, right? Different scaled weight, et cetera, or a variety of the exercises. But what you're saying is that the return on investment that they get for investing 30 minutes 3 times a week, right? Or 40 minutes 3 times a week, 50 minutes 3 times a week of walking, some sort of cardiovascular activity and strength training is huge.
Yeah.
And their ability to do activities of daily living, ADLs, as we used to call them. My degree is in sports medicine, so I always go back to, yeah, how are your ADLs? Right? And then, but a lot of people who don't necessarily think that they're limited don't realize that they're limited until, like you said, they go to Disney and they're like, oh man, there's
Yeah.
25,000 steps in Disney,
Yeah.
right?
That's
And
tough.
if you don't take 10,000 steps a day, you're gonna be you're gonna have a problem.
Yeah.
So, but I guess going back to 2014, even to now, and I was doing some research the other day from when I started, the obesity rate has gone from 30% of the country to close to 40%. What what have you seen from people who have gotten obese and or come back from that obese? What have you seen are the key characteristics to fighting and stemming the tide of the obesity pandemic epidemic in this country? What have you seen to be key factors? Is it mindset? Is it environment? Is it simply a gym membership, home gym? What are you seeing?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. You probably read that book Switch by
Hmm.
who's it, Chip?
Yeah,
Is
Spike
it
Lee.
right up there?
Yeah.
Talking about how like we're riding an we're riding on an elephant, right? Uh, and it's really the path that is really it's a great analogy because like
Really is.
we think we're in the driver's seat, right? And this is where people on social media get so mad at me because I just straight up say obesity is not a choice. Look, you can choose to fight back and you can choose to do something about it, but like if you're not thinking about it, we're on this passive track and the track is really our environment. Now, our genetics also play a large role, and I'll stick to that. But for example, like I can tell my genetics want me to be thinner. I can just tell. I can overcome it if I want to, but like but like most of my patients, their genetics want them to be larger. And people are like, but what, like you said, why? But why does our genetics aren't just all of a sudden changing right now? Our environment is. And I think if we wanted to have a massive, massive, massive impact on it, there would have to be technological changes, massive changes in legislation to our environment. And I've dabbled in some public health trainings and whatever. It's easier said than done. Like we'd have to dismantle all of like basically big food. Now, having said that, in order to if let's say, hey, this is out of our control, this is big, that's big, big government stuff that like on an individual level we can't control. What can we control? Well, yeah, mindset does play a role. You have to make up your mind that you want to do something about it. So let's say you want to do something about it. Okay. Well, then also, like I said, genetics and biology do play a role. So what happens in obesity is that people think it's just all a willpower issue. Well, yeah, in the beginning, it's mostly just passive, like you said, and going through our environment. We're just kind of passively, subconsciously eating and doing what we enjoy. We're not thinking about our weights. And then there becomes a point where like, oh gosh, I should do something about this. I'm gaining weight. Well, the biology actually changes in our body, and it's our brains that control how much we eat and want to eat. You can try to fight against that and be like, I'm going to consciously reduce my calorie intake, but on a subconscious level, just like our breathing, our heart rate, or anything like that, our appetite is there still. And that will eventually win. You can't, like, it's hard to overcome those appetite drives, despite how hard you try. And that's why you see such a relatively low success. I would say, I don't know if it's a success rate, I would say response rate. That's the better term for diet and exercise alone for obesity treatment. You see around like 10-15% really getting that 15 to 20% of their total body weight off. So for anybody that's 300 pounds, that's 30 to 30 or more pounds, 10%. 10, 30, 60 pounds if you're 300 pounds, let's say. That's a 10 to 20% weight loss. For most, on average, you see around 5% weight loss. So, we're talking about 15 pounds. And then over the years, that kind of wanes. And that's because our biology is fighting against us. So sure, you can make the attempt. You can try to fight against that biology. Uh, but in the end, most people's will fight back against them. And that's where, this is where I get into these biological drugs and these tools to kind of fight back against that. And that's what everybody's seeing these new shots. And these drugs basically hit the receptors in the brain that control our appetite to where then all of a sudden it brings choice and agency back into the equation. So for example, people may say, well, that lady brought in donuts to the office. You don't have to eat those. Eat an apple instead. Yeah, that's that's a probably a good thing. Eat some carrots instead. Or matter of fact, just you don't even need to eat a snack. Okay, so that's pretty intuitive, and most people know that. Most people know that broccoli and apples or whatever are probably a better option than French fries, donuts, the pizza in the break room that people bring in, whatever. That's always like in the ER. There's always donuts, cookies, and pizza. That's what people do.
Hmm.
It's easier said than done. And everybody, if people are listening to this going, and some of us, they're like, but I'm disciplined. I can do it. Well, you may not have that same biology. Like I can avoid it. I'm pretty good at doing it. Like, but other patients that what they describe is that it's just like I always think about Monterey Jack. Do you remember Rescue Rangers?
No.
You don't remember Chippendale Rescue Rangers?
Oh, Chippendale? Yeah.
Yeah. The Monterey Jack, when he smelled the cheese and he couldn't I don't want to say it's
Oh,
addictive because
yes.
but it has these foods can have with our changed physiology. So back to what I was saying, when we gain weight, there's actually biological changes in our brain that may just kind of nudge us more in that direction where we don't have that inhibition to stop ourselves. And so these drugs basically hit those receptors, hit these different receptors in the brain that all of a sudden it's like, boop, I don't need to have it anymore. And it's just what people say is it's not only just their hunger and appetite, but it's also thoughts about food, which is
Hmm.
different. Like it's not specific food and cravings. It's like there are people, and there may be people listening to this where they just, even though they just got done eating and they can feel that they're satiated and they're full, but they're still thinking about their next meal, when they're going to eat, and what these and but other people that are listening going, I don't have that problem. But a lot of patients with obesity, they'll describe this, and these drugs, they hit those receptors, and all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, yeah, sure, I'll have that apple instead of the pizza, or I'll just skip it altogether. I can do it.
Right.
So I think those are going to be part of the solution. But like, people are like, oh, you think we're going to outdrug this epidemic? I not it right now. The supply chain's not bad. I mean, I suppose at some point the supply chain it just these drugs are just like so. And by the way, the pipeline of these drugs is getting ridiculous to the point where it's like, I mean, they have to be studied, but these things are having just massive amounts of weight loss. Even the ones that are out right now are massive amounts of weight loss, but the newer ones that are in the pipeline are just, it's getting ridiculous. But let's say that these drugs are everywhere and the supply chain's not an issue. Will that actually solve the obesity epidemic? I don't know. I can't say it won't, but I can also say that I think part of the solution will be big government, big food, some sort of change there, because like that book, Switch, I think we still are on this pathway that we can't necessarily control, and the elephant's controlling it. Um, anyway, that's
Well,
a long rant,
and
but
no, but there's a couple nuggets there. So first, let's go back to the supply chain because I found that interesting. I haven't heard this, and and to be honest, this is why I wanted to talk to you because this is not my area of expertise. However, having moved to the Midwest, I can confidently say I see obesity versus in New York. Okay, I see obesity as I see obesity and morbidly obese. So people just getting out of the car and like slow getting out of the car and slow moving or with a cane, etc. And they're not what I would call old, right? They may be mid 40s or 50s, and they're already limited. So I've seen a higher prevalence of obesity, and that's why I'm curious about this. But with the supply chain, what are the ramifications of a limited supply chain right now for the person who may need it, right, over somebody who may not, somebody who may qualify for this, and then somebody who says I want to lose 10 to 15 pounds? What what are the ramifications? And I think the question is twofold, but from a socioeconomic standpoint, but also from a long-term standpoint for somebody who only needs to lose 10 to 15 pounds.
yeah. So here's people get mad at me when I post about this. I'm very passionate about saying, please don't use these for vanity weight loss. And when I say vanity weight loss, all I mean there is someone without that's what we would call them clinically healthy, clinically lean. They meet no indication, not even close of any indication for these medicines of which they've been studied for. And vanity weight loss, 15 pounds in someone who's already lean who wants to fit in some sort of clothing.
Mhm.
I don't want to say a dress because I don't want to assume it could be a guy. They want to look a certain way. That there's bodybuilders using this. Um, the supply chain's low because there's finally a tool out there that like and we can talk about the side effects, that's relatively, and I'd say very safe relatively compared to other drugs, that also just works so well that actually improves quality of life beyond the weight loss. So what people, because I talked about those receptors in the brain, people now describe just having less anxiety around food.
Mhm.
The thoughts around food were so great that like it even if they lost weight, the relationship with food and the anxiety around food was so great that it like made it not worth it to them in some ways. Other people is fine, but like the benefit would outweigh the risk. But these drugs do both of those things to where people feel good. So finally, we have these drugs, and so uh, I don't know if you say fortunately, unfortunately, I suppose with the stars, the Hollywood stars and celebrities using them, that's kind of what propelled some of this notoriety on social media, I suppose, some of it. But I think honestly, it was going to happen regardless. TikTok and Instagram and not so much Facebook and Twitter, a little bit of Twitter maybe.
Mhm.
Um, the virality of it, I was kind of one of the original doctors talking about these newer drugs and just what we're seeing with patient results, and those would go viral, and then patients would start posting about them, and now they're going viral, and now it's just kind of like a it's kind of a thing. So that these companies that come out with this, so there's Novo Nordisk, they're the ones that came out with something called Wegovy, that's semaglutide. Semaglutide is also in called Ozempic. So just for anybody listening, everybody hears colloquially and in their vernacular of these drugs is just Ozempic. Ozempic is actually semaglutide. Semaglutide is a GLP-1 receptor agonist. GLP-1 stands for glucagon like peptide 1. It's a natural hormone that comes from our intestine that is broken down very quickly within minutes after we eat. So researchers found ways to make a similar type of peptide that you inject that doesn't get broken down by our body. And then they've modified it in ways where it gets in maybe hitting parts of our brain in different ways, hitting receptors differently, having different downstream effects than even our own natural GLP-1. But the gist of it is that they found ways to keep it around in our body longer and maybe at super physiological doses. So that was semaglutide. And these have been around since 2005. It started off like injecting twice per day, then once per day. Semaglutide is once per week, and it seems to be stronger than some of the other one per week injections. So that was 2017. Ozempic gets approved.
Wow.
2020, yeah, 2021. What they did is they took semaglutide when it only went up to 1 milligram in Ozempic at that time. They studied it in doses up to 2.4. So, more than double
Hmm.
of what the Ozempic was. And they showed, and these are step trials, anybody can look them up, 15% average, around 15% or so average total body weight loss in those with obesity. These were drugs were first approved for type 2 diabetes. I can explain what the incretin effect is, but it doesn't really matter. These drugs also have an effect on appetite. So they found 15% average body weight loss. Now, if you remember what I said before, when you look at gold standard, big time behavioral lifestyle uh, trials, where you're looking at like maybe 5, 6, 7% total body weight loss on average over the course of a year, and then it dwindles from there. We see now this is 15%. Older drugs, you see in more of that 6 to 10% range. So now we're going 15%, and bariatric surgery is 30%. So all of a sudden we're kind of bridging this gap. And so you see this massive weight loss with what seems to be, side effects that are manageable. There's, we can talk about nausea, constipation, some of these other things. There's some other very rare side effects that can get more serious, but like in general, very well tolerated. And now you're looking at 15%, and it's like all that misery that you had while diet and exercising is gone, and now you can actually skip the potato chips and pizza at the break room, and now you can just stick to your whatever you made at home. Or you can go have a slice of pizza, but it's instead of eating 3 slices, it's one slice type of thing.
Hmm.
This goes
Well,
on social media. People go nuts about it, and then of course, celebrities are going to do it. They're going to use it for vanity. They're rich. They can buy whatever they want. Boom, 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 boom. These supply chains, Novo Nordisk is the one that came out with Wegovy. I, a lot of doctors are upset about it, and patients, of course, too. They couldn't keep up. They still can't keep up with the demand. And then the other one is called Zepbound or tirzepatide or Mounjaro for type 2 diabetes, Zepbound for obesity, but that's Eli Lilly. And they're trying to keep up with the demand, and they seem to be doing all right, but it's still you can see it on shortage lists all the time because it's they're amazing.
so maybe I'm wrong, but is is some of your is a phrase that you hear often, I've tried everything.
Yeah, that's what they'll say. I've done everything. And honestly, we do like a medical history taking, and you can see like low carb keto. I mean, we even have it
Everything.
in Weight Watchers, calorie counting, coaching, and they'll list. I mean, the average person's done like multiple different types of things. And then when you get down to, you ask them why. I always like to know why. It doesn't really change what we do. Some people are like, I think I have a slow metabolism. It's like, you probably don't. But when they start the medicine, they'll go, oh, I know what it was. I was I couldn't stop thinking about food. And now all of a sudden, now they can. Anyway, kind of interesting stuff.
Well, and so something you mentioned when we started was about orthopedic. I'm wondering downstream, right, of the effects of, all right, so you get a 5'8", 250-pound person who loses 15% in how long?
So that's over the course of 68 weeks, but it happens, you see like a half to 1% or so per week in kind of the beginning, and it starts to slow down. But 15%, the study length was 68 weeks in that study. So the newer one, by the way, is Zepbound or tirzepatide. That was 72 weeks, and they get more like 20% ish, or even a little bit more. You extend that out to like 88 weeks. Now we're starting to see like 25%. It's like
It's
a,
crazy.
a fifth to a quarter of their weight
Yeah.
is gone.
So this is my question about giving them an empowering feeling of like, wait, now I have this agency. I have the thought bubbles are gone. Now I can start thinking about longevity. I can start thinking about movement quality. I can start thinking about again activities of daily living becoming easier. It is there any thought within the obesity specialty in terms of what you're dealing with and how you're approaching this with clients of this decrescendo of all right, so let's say they start off and they lose that 15 to 20% over the course, let's call it a year, right? And then is there an increase in strength training and other empowering activities? And I say this from an orthopedic standpoint, right? Like we know if you lose 4 pounds of body weight, that's excuse me, if you lose 1 pound of body weight and you're obese, that's 4 pounds less per knee, right? Like that old study. But so I say this from an orthopedic standpoint, but I wonder how much hormonal changes will happen over the course of, let's call it the 1 year, 2 year, and then the 3 year mark. How many of these changes that'll happen in the short term will influence their long term, again, their optimism towards, yeah, okay, I did try everything. That didn't work. Now I'm empowered to try and take
Yeah.
control of, right?
Yeah. So that's so here's the false dichotomy you see on Twitter. It's for whatever reason you see these low carb, I call them low carb zealots because they're just straight up zealots. They get really upset about these medicines. They're like, huh, you just use these drugs and like they're bad for you, like go low carb. And it's like, no, you don't understand these drugs. They've done keto and low carb so many times. Oh, they didn't do it right. It's like, okay, all right, yeah, they all didn't do it right. They've had multiple coaches and they've done it all like the way the
Mm-hmm.
books say. Like, get out of here. These drugs, they they like you said, they lower the weight to where people were in pain. Now all of a sudden they're not in pain. They're like, hey, I'm feeling pretty good. I
Mm-hmm.
think I want to join a gym. I like I can go walk now. I can start biking. I can be active. So I think these medicines actually drive behavior change. This is like a contra I don't this needs to be studied a little bit more, but this is my experience. Some people, sure, will they take the drug and just keep eating what they want to eat? I suppose people are seeing that, but my experience, and maybe I'm a selection bias because people come to me because they know I'm into behavior change and exercise, but they couldn't do it before because of pain and just fatigue. Now they use a drug, they're starting to feel better, and very quickly they start getting into those things. And this is why, like, I'm a weightlifting zealot. Like, I want everybody to lift weights, and they don't have to. If they want to do other physical activity, fine. But like now, all of a sudden, they feel like they don't have the pain. They feel more. They have more energy. Maybe they're sleeping better. Their sleep apnea is probably starting to resolve or
Mm-hmm.
improve. Now they actually have energy to start prepping their meals. Now they have energy to even go to the gym. Maybe they felt so tired in the morning. Now they're like, I'm feeling refreshed when I wake up. All those different types of things. So
Wow.
yeah, I think I think these medicines, it just even without a lot of guidance, it's just a little bit of guidance, change behavior. And I think we'll see more studies on that. I certainly think so. That's my bet, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and I guess I was thinking of it certainly from a like a video game, a gamification standpoint. Like you beat one boss. All right,
Yeah.
I beat those thought bubbles. Now what? Now
Yeah. Yeah.
before they had said I can't beat this one boss. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
food. And now
Yep.
now when you start to empower people who forever had said And nothing works. They all
Yeah.
fail, right? So, all right. So as an agent of change, and you're one of the change makers I would look to. What what is the ramifications for somebody who isn't working out? And then we talked about this a little bit. So who isn't working out, and I'm going to go to the blood and hormonal panel. But what are the ramifications for somebody who isn't working out? They've lost some body weight. Now they're going to try to work out 2, 3 times a week. Let's call it with weights and or cardio. What are they going to see? You mentioned better sleep, but what are they going to see on blood panels, hormones? Like what are some of the other side effects that people may not, because we're talking vanity for some of this, but also
Yeah.
like some of the hormonal side effects. But let's say they're not working out, they start working out. What are some of these other side effects from a hormonal standpoint, blood sugar standpoint, all these other things that may be not discussed because so many people are just focused on, like you said, that weight loss.
Yeah. I will clarify, whenever I say vanity weight loss, if somebody has obesity and lots of issues from their obesity and they want to lose weight simply for vanity reasons, I'm fine with that. It's just those who don't have any of those things where it's purely a vanity gain and they're not going to get any health gain from it. So
Should we quantify that then?
yeah,
So
it's
usually it's by
some,
the
okay.
BMI.
Yeah. So yeah, BMI's has some faults, but like the FDA guidelines go by BMI. So it's a 30 BMI and above, you qualify. Now, if you come in, like I had a 30 BMI in college as a heavyweight, we're not talking about muscular athletic people. You still have to
Mhm.
assess for adiposity, but you can tell, like when somebody walks in, people that walk into my clinic, they're not NFL linebackers. Like that's such a, everybody's like BMI is nonsense. And it's like, uh, I, it's very rare to see someone with a 30 and a more BMI that's like doesn't isn't at higher risk of health issues. So 30 BMI and above, yes, assess for muscularity and all those different caveats of BMI. But there's also 27 BMI plus what's called a comorbidity. This is anything related to the weight, blood sugar issues, prediabetes, PCOS, even uh,
Mhm.
osteoarthritis of the knee or hip, obstructive sleep apnea. Uh, you can get liver disease, cholesterol issues, triglycerides elevated, all those types of things. Blood pressure is a common thing. So 27 plus one of those things will also help you qualify. So if you're, let's say if you're lean, and I don't even say in 27, if you're like 24, let's say you're 24 BMI and for whatever reason, you're just, and you're just extremely healthy and you just want to lose 5 to 10 pounds and get down to like a 22, like whatever. You go from a size whatever to a small or an extra small. That's not a reason to take the medicine. I wouldn't in the future, maybe if it's studied and these drugs have been shown to like, hey, even if you're in this range, you'll actually prevent heart attacks. Fine. But at this point, it's just not studied. I would be worried about frailty. You don't want to make people, and this is why even in even for just diet and exercise, like diet itself, there's a lot of guarding around like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be telling people, and this is the diet culture, right? This is
Mhm.
straight up diet culture. Everybody wants to be thinner and whatever, but sometimes that can cause more harm than good because if you're restricting yourself and then going back, it's possible you could be unfavorably changing your body composition in a way where you're losing muscle, and then when you regain weight, maybe it's more of percentage of fat compared to muscle, and then you do it again, and you're in this cycle. Again, that's controversial, and a lot of say it's possible you regain
Mhm.
the weight and you just go back to the same body composition. But that's the concern. So when I talk about these drugs for vanity, like until it's studied, I wouldn't mess around. But so when we're talking about somebody where it's indicated, where it's either type 2 diabetes or just obesity in general, you can see this with diet and exercise too, for weight loss percentages. So just with like 3 to 4% weight loss, even that little bit amount, you start seeing improvements in blood sugars and blood pressure. You hit the 5 and going up to 5 to 10%. We're starting to see triglyceride improvements, more blood sugar improvements, more blood pressure improvements. You start hitting that 10 and higher percent. Now we're starting to see improvements in in knee pain, obstructive sleep apnea. We're starting to see improvement in the liver fat that people have. And then you go, 15 to 20%, you start seeing even more and more of those improvements there. So um, those are the things you expect to see. Now, these drugs do have a blood sugar lowering effect just without weight loss too.
Mhm.
That's how the drugs were made. That was the original discovery. Basically, what happened was researchers back in the 50s or 60s, they made people drink glucose versus injecting glucose straight into the veins, and they wanted to see the insulin response. And what they found is that people drinking glucose actually had more of an insulin response. And they're like,
Hmm.
oh, why would that be? They called it the intestinal secretion of insulin. They weren't really sure. They called it the incretin effect. Something about eating had a more pronounced effect on causing the pancreas to release more insulin than injecting glucose straight in the blood. You would think you inject it straight to the blood, it goes to the pancreas and starts releasing insulin, but no, it's eating it. And then later on, they found these specific what they call incretins, and this is one of them is called a GLP-1. It's GLP-1. So
Wow.
by themselves, they do lower blood sugar because of it helps you delay the gastric emptying, which means um, that you're not getting blood sugar or blood glucose straight into as quickly into the blood, but like they have an effect straight on the pancreas where it actually augments the pancreas's ability to release insulin. So there's that effect. But honestly, over when we see these massive amounts of weight loss, that's where it's like, oh, I think that's really where the big cardiometabolic effects are. Now, the other thing is there was a big study that just came out in November called the SELECT trial, and they showed decreases in heart attacks in those who had a history of cardiovascular disease. And people are like, oh, it must be all the weight loss that happened with it. But there's something about the drug, and they've seen this in studies with those in type 2 diabetes. There's something about the drug specifically that probably, and there's GLP-1 receptors on the heart. There's probably something about the actual GLP-1 that's reducing cardiovascular disease events as well beyond just the weight loss. So anyway, kind of interesting stuff.
I mean, fascinating. And for to take it even one step deeper, um, what when you say blood sugar levels get better, talk to me
Yeah.
about, for instance, when somebody starts off, but before they're on one of these GLP-1 receptors, before they're on a whatever, um, their tolerance for, let's call it, carbohydrates, because of their blood sugar levels, is not that great. Now let's go 12 months, 18 months in, they've lost, call it, 15%, 20%, and they've started to do weight training. If in the beginning they were able to eat 75 to 150 grams of carbs, and I'm just using round numbers, now what happens 12 to 18 months in? What are you seeing for people who are losing the weight, and what are your thoughts on, how different their life is, looking at, I'm not going to just going to say carbohydrates, but sort of, because that has to do with blood sugar.
Yeah. So, I mean, if they had blood sugar issues in the first place, I mean, you see anywhere from a 1% to 2% decreases in what's called their hemoglobin A1C.
Mhm.
Some of these people, they could be on insulin, they get off of insulin. Um, other type 2 diabetes medicines now, all of a sudden they don't have to take them. They also don't have to take maybe blood pressure medicines as well. So all of a sudden, their other medicines that they had to take for all their chronic issues don't need to be taken anymore, and it's
Hmm.
replaced with something that hits more downstream, which is the obesity, the adiposity, the fat tissue. So that's what we see. I mean, those are the big improvements we see, and that alone obviously can have a big impact on their quality of life. Some people don't care about the injections, but maybe checking their blood sugars. Now we have these continuous glucose monitors, so it's not as big of a deal. But yeah, that now all of a sudden they're not at risk for uh, nephropathy, issues with their kidneys, issues with their eyes, um, neuropathies in their feet. I mean, just not having their blood sugars normalized, just it has massive ramifications for their life ongoing.
Hmm. I You mentioned something in one of your podcasts that I listened to previously about your bedside manner. And I think, to anybody that knows you and your personality on social media, they think Spencer is this joke guy, this meme guy.
Yeah.
But I know for a fact that when it comes down to this stuff, your your bedside manner is probably at the top, top percentage in your profession and or in a doctor world. How important is that role of bedside manner? And I say this to people who listen from a what they're looking for in a practitioner, but I also look and say from practitioners who may not have the empathic gene that you have. I would argue I hope to have as much of an empathic gene as you have. But how do you pass on the importance of the empathic practitioner to the role of helping somebody who is fighting obesity?
Yeah, it's a lot of just listening and just like it's understanding everybody's obesity bias in the past and like knowing that I'm not living in their shoes. And so people are so guarded when it comes to their weight. They've been shamed by the doctor in the past. So when you it's actually can be really difficult when you're first talking to a patient, but when you show that you're like, "Hey, I actually care. I'm just going to listen and I'm going to help you. I'm going to see you for who you are as opposed to just see you as your weight on a scale." It opens people up to where it's like, "Oh, this guy actually cares and he's going to listen to me and just help me figure things out." That's it. It's not like a I've been telling some people, you can't just like pretend that you care. It doesn't matter what you write and whatever. You actually have to care. That's the most important part because I think
Mhm.
people can tell whether you care or not. Um, and when you don't care, it doesn't matter what kind of like lip service you get. People can tell. And so I think that's like even though I can be really goofy and whatever on social media, it's funny, but like when when people are reading the messaging and whatever, they can tell that I care. And then when I see them as a patient, also I'm lucky because I've gotten out of the system. Other doctors aren't lucky. They have to see like 20 to 30 people in a day. Like how do you show that you care in a short amount of time? So I just refuse to do that type of work now. And now I want to make sure my patients have access to me as opposed to and time with me. So that also helps. I can't say that it's like, oh, I'm this great, amazing doctor. If you're in that system and we talk about the elephant on the path, you kind of go you go with that system. So I think a lot of people are disadvantaged. A lot of doctors are disadvantaged, but also that people don't understand obesity bias anyway. You hear about the stories about like, oh, I went in for back pain and the doctor just told me to lose weight. Well, it turns out I had a tumor on my spine. Those are relatively rare, but like the doctor couldn't see past the weight and didn't
Mhm.
treat them as if they were just another human being coming in. They just saw the weight. And yeah, surely weight can have an impact on pain and ortho issues, but you don't want to just assume. And so people put on their blinders. So you do have to learn. And actually, I've talked about this before. Like you see my social media, and I'm like, oh, you shouldn't shame those with obesity. You shouldn't have a bias, but you actually have to recognize the bias first. And if somebody says they don't have a bias, they're lying. Like I still have biases that I have to recognize that I have, and then I have to act upon fighting those biases. So like I'm not coming here as from like a holier than thou position of like, oh, well, everybody, but because everybody has a bias, and it's funny when I see some posts on social media, I'm like, they're like that person is saying things in a very holier than thou way, but everybody has their biases. So I think the most important thing is recognizing it and then fighting it internally. And then once you do that, you can then give better care too. Because like honestly, I don't know what it's like I've not lived in one of my patients' shoes, but
Mhm.
I've talked to so many, and I've had some of my own issues that I can at least empathize somewhat and then just listen to them and listen to enough people where they all have the similar stories to go like, I could see that biologically in different ways. And then just go from there. That's all.
Hmm. No, I like that. So with we've known each other 10 years, so 2014 to 2024, you've had one foot almost in the fitness industry, I want to say. A lot of our friends are mutual friends, bros. We've lifted together, we've run together, we've gone to seminars together. The role of the fitness industry in changing the tide of this and or because you and I have talked about this, and or the role of a horizontally integrated clinic. So a physical therapist, a nutritionist, an obesity specialist, personal trainers, and a gym. Is that the model? Is that when Spencer Nadolsky thinks of the dream world? Excuse me, Dr. Spencer. When Spencer thinks of the dream setting, is that the dream setting for stemming this tide, for showing people that it's possible, for having the right to, like what do you envision? Again, 10 years back. What do you see 10 years forward?
Yeah, yeah, that I
What?
mean that's always been the vision because I think like for I go to I have this powerhouse gym that I go to. I freaking love it. It's got all the machines that I they need all sorts of different angles that you can do if you're having certain pains. Like, oh, I'm going to do it like this. Um, but I would be so stupid to assume that like telling one of my patients just go there, get a membership because it would be intimidating. Like people don't people would be so intimidated. So the ideal situation is someone comes in to an empathetic, understanding uh, obesity physician who has a multidisciplinary team of a strength coach, personal trainer that understands biomechanics of those and the struggles of those with obesity, um, and physical therapist, same kind of thing, a multidisciplinary team. Because I do think in the end, like exercise is medicine. I'm not going to lie and tell them that exercise is going to be the thing that gets all their weight off or anything like that. But like movement is so powerful in just so many realms. It's like a GLP-1, like it hits these different receptors and has different effects. It's just it's great. So yeah, I think the dream situation would be at least that to get people comfortable moving forward. Maybe it doesn't end up being their gym of choice for the long run, but that would to me that would be the dream. Uh, yeah, I can't see anything better than that.
I love it. And I'm finishing this book by Dr. Peter Attia. You've probably heard of the book. Maybe you've read it, maybe you haven't. But my final question for you is, and unless we do more Q and A's, et cetera, but how has the role of people who are speaking out about, not just because again we started this conversation talking about we could help people in their 40-yard dash, in their deadlift,
Yeah.
et cetera, but this whole book about outlive, right? And also about what you're talking about. I look at the bell curve about helping people. And what we're talking about is somebody who's on Good Morning America, who's on Tim Ferriss, who's on Joe Rogan, talking about the role of longevity. Okay. How has something like that, Gabriel Lyon's book, how has something like that made your life different? Because it's public knowledge now that it's popular books. These are top 10. These are millions of people are listening to Rogan and Ferris talking about the role of longevity and it being a bigger goal than performance. So how has that changed maybe life for you as a doctor or your profession, um, as a doctor in maybe prescribing, health and fitness, or I should say exercise and et cetera.
Yeah, what's interesting is that the people that read those books, and look, I think they've probably had an impact on some general population, maybe that weren't doing those things. But what's interesting is that a lot of people that read those books were kind of health conscious in the first place. That's what I'm seeing so far. My patients that like, I mean, you can imagine the people out there, they're not reading those books. Um, so what I'm seeing is that there's other people like, oh yeah, now at least with like Outlive, like I always give Peter, like I joke about Peter Thiel all the time because he can say some outlandish things, but like at least now people are thinking about their apolipoprotein B and at
Mm-hmm.
least like cholesterol issues. Like, oh, don't listen to the carnivore crazy people who say that cholesterol doesn't matter. Hey, these things, here are the simple things that do matter when it comes to living long term without having cardiovascular disease and those types of things. But like in general, the people that read those books, most people don't read in the first place, right? So
That's
like,
true.
so the people that get into these books, they tend to be like, I feel like though these have helped people optimize, but they're still not hitting the people who just need to start. That's what I think. And I don't
Hmm.
think they're bad books, or I didn't read them, but I understand the gist. And like I haven't seen anything that was like, oh God, that's some pseudoscience there. So I think they're overall good. It's just that in order to shift it and get people to actually start, I don't know how to. I do it with memes, of course. I make
Hmm.
funny memes and hopefully spark some conversation and get people going, oh, what's this guy talking about? Oh, that's funny. And I get those messages like, oh, because of you, I started doing this. But that's where this public health and changing the environment, somehow getting people shifting the environment to where it becomes so automatic that we don't need to even like write a book for people to read a whole thing to figure it out, you know? That would be my thing. Just make it
So,
automatic and passive.
so there's two things there because I just thought of something. So one about your gym intimidation, the gym intimidation. So I had a conference just a while back, and the hotel gym, which was amazing, but it was a fitness conference, and so the hotel gym had all of the fitness people working out at the same time, and the squat rack opened up, and there was a moment when probably 10 of us looked at each other and we're like, I'm not going in that rack. You're going to go in that rack? I'm not working out in front of 15 other fitness professionals because that's going to be intimidating. So, and I talk about the gym intimidation because some people are like, it doesn't exist. It does exist for people who haven't been in a gym. But the thing, and I'm curious your thoughts, the thing that I've seen is that once you're in the gym, everybody in the gym wants to help you,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
right?
very
If you ask
for the most
somebody for a
part.
spot, or
Yeah,
hey, can you watch me on this one? Cool. Can you just watch my left knee? Like, everybody wants to see you succeed.
yeah. There's some jerks though because they'll post things on social media, so then that makes people not like, oh, someone's watching me. But I'd say for the most part, especially a gym like yours, everybody wants to help. My gym, I can tell it's a very friendly place, but it can be
Hmm.
intimidating just because you see some muscle gargantuan, both guys and gals. There's some gals in there that are like, I mean, they're strong. It's like it can be intimidating.
Yeah,
Um, so even for an average person who doesn't even struggle with their weight, I'd be like, ooh. So yeah. But I think most people are helpful, yes.
yeah, I love that. So I know that people can find you at Dr. Spencer Nadolsky on Instagram. Anywhere else you want people to look you up?
Yeah, Dr. Nadolsky on Instagram. I don't do much on TikTok. I do, and once in a while the viral video will go, and TikTok's another world. But you can find me at Dr. Spencer there, Dr. Nadolsky on Twitter, Docs Who Lift podcast. It's a popular one with me and my brother. We just talk shit to each other and banter about health topics that are out, but a
Very
lot
cool.
about obesity and kind of endocrine stuff.
Hmm. Love
Yeah.
it.
All right,
Awesome.
man.
Well, thanks so
Thanks
much,
for
my man.
having me on.
Absolutely. It's been a blast.
See ya.
All right, bye.